Yeah. Okay, we will start. Yeah. We are starting. So, this time we have Lingfei Qian, Dr. Lingfei Qian from our lab to introduce his work. And Dr. Xue is on vacation, so this time we'll into the discussion. So as requested by him, if anyone wants to join this into the group meeting, you can introduce yourself, so we can know each other. Yeah. So, anyone first time joining this one? No? Yeah. Please do that.
Sure. Chris Kang, I'm a sixth-year PhD student in bioinformatics.
Yeah.
My name is Guanan, so I'm a research faculty at the Yale School.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, any other people or no? Please, no response. Okay, then maybe we can get started. So you can introduce yourself.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lingfei Qian, a postdoc from Dr. Hua Xu's group. And I am really glad to have this opportunity to share some of the relevant work and our preliminary research about how to leverage large language models for passing clinical trial criteria.
It seems like maybe this microphone issue. Yeah, we just unplugged it.
Okay.
Yeah, let's try.
Okay, my presentation mainly including three parts. The first is the background of passing, the importance of passing clinical trial criteria. The second part is some review about what relevant work have been done for this work. And the third is our preliminary research about this task. First, let's start from background. Clinical trials play an important role in the medical field. They are essential for medical care improvement. For example, especially for assessing the effectiveness of new treatment before they become widely available to patients, and also for optimizing existing therapy by evaluating and refining them to ensure they continue to provide the best possible outcomes for patients. And to start a clinical trial, inclusion and exclusion criteria must be designed. Then eligible patients need to be identified based on the designed criteria to start the clinical trials. However, the design criteria for clinical trials are often very complex, making it challenging to efficiently identify eligible patients. The development of electronic health records make this process become significantly more manageable. EHRs provide a comprehensive and structured repository, structured data of patient data, which can be leveraged to quickly and accurately match individuals to clinical trial criteria. However, despite the advantages, it remains challenging because the criteria is in the format of natural language and EHR are usually stored in a structured way. Therefore, it is necessary to transfer the natural language criteria into like SQL queries to find target patients. With the correct SQL queries, large amount of target patients could be found in the EHR. But developing SQLs based on the input criteria is actually a difficult task. Domain experts is usually needed to transfer the criteria into the correct SQL, which is laborious, time-consuming, and could be subjective. The development of natural language processing offers a solution to this problem. Natural language processing models could bridge the gap between natural language criteria and the structured EHR data. NLP models could reduce the amount of manual labor needed from domain experts and also enhancing both recruitment speed and accuracy, and makes the process standardized and consistent. Now, next step, we would want to define the task of parsing clinical trial into SQLs. From the angle of NLP, the input is actually the natural language criteria and maybe the schema of the database, and the output is the correct SQL query. The task is usually also called text to SQL. There are many works focusing on text to SQL tasks in general domain, and these tasks, these works could be roughly divided into two parts. The first is the rule-based parsing models, and the second is sequence generation models. The rule-based models are usually limited by coverage of the rules and have less flexibility. And with the development of deep learning models, there are more and more work based on sequence generation to address these limitations. These kind of models are more flexible and have better learning capabilities. Text to SQL remains a quite challenging task, even with the development of large language models. This is actually a public challenging dataset called BERT. And we can see that even with the help of GPT, the execute accuracy is still around 70%, which is quite slow. And text to SQL in clinical domain is actually more challenging when compared to general domain, because the clinical trial is actually more complex. Because, for example, for multi-arm clinical trial, there are comparisons need to be done between different groups of patients, and different groups of patients also have like different criteria, which make these criteria have a lot number of entities and the relationships to be met. For example, here, within the single criteria, there are like 7 or 8 entity and relations in this criteria, which is hard to understand the logical structure of this criteria. And a lot of researches have been done for the task. Next step, I will do a simple literature review for parsing criteria. The review mainly consists of two parts, some of the prior work and some of the current work after the development of large language models. So the prior work on parsing clinical criteria, trial criteria could be roughly divided into two parts. The first is the step-by-step parsing, and the second is end-to-end parsing. So for the first step, these models usually treat the criteria as input and use some natural language methods like NER or RE models to like do semantic parsing based on these criteria, and then use the past structured relations to generate SQLs. So the SQL generation methods could be divided into like rule-based methods or tool and API-based methods for this prior work. And next, I will introduce one of these works to show how the pipeline works. So this criteria to query is actually a typical work of this. From this criteria query is a pipeline work that focusing on the whole process of criteria to SQL query. So the input is criteria in free text format, and the final output is the SQL query. It also provides an interface that's used to parse the criteria step by step, which could provide more insights of the semantic parsing of this criteria. The whole pipeline could be divided into 3 parts. The first is information extraction that use the NLP models like NER or RE, and the second is query formulation, like organize these relations with specific logic relations. And the last part is query review and editing. This means that a human is needed to review the generated query and edit it to generate the final correct SQL. Here is an example of the parsing process of criteria. We can see it annotated the many different types of entities like condition, measurement, procedure of value. And we can see that it's actually do not annotate many constraints of the condition. Here it says that may affect cognition, but it only annotated the AD and the other than AD, which is not correct. So this is the interface of the tool used to generate SQLs. Actually, it needs humans to input each past relations into this tool and then generate the final SQL. So here is the result of the NER and RE and many different components from this work. Although some of the components is actually the accuracy is very high, but for entity recognition and relation extraction, it is not very good. And this is a pipeline work, so the errors may accumulated by the whole pipeline. So the final accuracy is actually not very good. And recently, the development of large language models brought new approaches in cohort identification tasks in EHR. Large language models are known as have very high efficiency and improve human-machine interaction and provide more data analysis and insights. Now the large language models could be like divided into two parts. First is open source large language models, and the second is closed source large language models. Well, closed source large language models are usually have higher performance than the open source large language model, but usually cost more to use closed source large language models. And for some specific tasks, we could use like fine-tune tasks to further improve the performance of those open source large language models. Here is the overview of current work that using large language models for passing the clinical trial criteria. These works can be divided into three parts. The first is they only use large language models to do the semantic parsing. The second is similar as the previous one, like use the whole pipeline to do the cohort identification. And the third part of the methods, they transfer the task of cohort identification into patient trial matching. And with the development of large language models, there are actually some works that do not use semantic parsing steps to understand the criteria. For example, this zero shot and this large language model work do not need parsing the criteria, and they can also have good results. It shows the great capability of larger language models. I will also pick this paper to give a detailed overview of the whole pipeline with large language models. This is actually a latest version of the previous work that I have introduced. This paper is also design a pipeline that take the natural language eligibility criteria as input, and then finally generate the executable SQL query. Here, first, they use GPT to same as before to do the semantic parsing of the criteria. First, relation extraction and entity extraction. And then it used GPT-4 to generate SQL queries and provide some reasoning process about the whole process. And human could further refine or edit the reasoning process to regenerate the SQL. And for further review. If the person that find the reasoning process and SQL is correct, then it can use the SQL to generate the cohort, the target cohort. So compared with the previous one, it is actually more simple and do not need so many steps. So this is the detail of each component. First is concept extraction. The input is the task description and output format and some example, and also the schema of the database. And the output is actually a half structured data that have entity type or the detail of this entity. Next is SQL generation. It actually just input the formal output, which is half structured relation and the entity as input, and then use ChatGPT to directly generate SQLs based on this. The third is the reasoning part, provided the task description and those SQLs or the output from previous work, and then output the detailed reasoning process of this whole pipeline. So this is the result of the concept extraction. We can see that it almost extracts all concepts in this criteria. And this is more like results compared with previous work. It is surprising to see that GPT 3.5 actually failed in this case because it do not annotate any of these entities. But compared with this previous version, it's actually the performance improved a lot. This body weight is marked as measurement, and this is a quantity. So this is the quantified results of the latest version with GPT-4 compared with previous version. We can see the F1 score for the relation extraction or entity extraction is almost 90% compared with previous 70%. So this is the analysis of the generated SQLs. We can see that even with the GPT and with the refining of human or the reasoning process, and the GPT still generates some errors based on the marked entities and the reasoning process. So after reviewing this work, we can find that previous work that before large language models usually are more complicated, have more complicated design, and it needs specially training to use the tool that I presented before to type the entity and type the relations into the tool and generate the SQL. With the help of large language models, we could have simpler design and higher accuracy for the semantic parsing, and we can even automatically generate SQLs without any experience of using these tools. So if we have more powerful large language models in the future, we could finally do not need any human efforts to write the SQLs. And next, I will introduce the challenges that we met when using large language models for the task and our preliminary work based on these challenges. From previous review, we found that there are two main steps in parsing the criteria. The first step is that the models has to understand the semantic meaning of the criteria. The second is that the model needs to generate SQL query. In the first step, the complex logical structure and complex phenotypes in this criteria makes it is challenging to understand the semantic meaning of the criteria. The second step, the issues with large language models based generation makes the large language model generate unexecutable SQLs. Next, I will introduce these challenges one by one with exact examples. First is the challenges in understanding the criteria caused by complex logic structure. Here is the example. We can see that there are three medicines in this criteria, and they are connected with OR logic. And for the first medication, there are more constraints to constrain the medication used sceneries. And if I use a generic prompt or prompts from previous work to generate a SQL, the result is actually wrong because it just add all these conditions, all these medications together with the AND logic. And also for this major depression, which is used to like modify the first medication, is also added here. The same level as these latter two medications. For the complex phenotypes, if we just use the generic prompts or use previous prompts, it will cause like insufficient definitions of these complex phenotypes, or actually no definitions for these phenotypes. For example, here we use the significant disease of liver as input, and we use generic prompts. The large language model will like have 5 conditions that could be relevant to the significant disease of liver. And if we try to use those previous prompts, the large language model actually just generates the concept idea as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it needs human to further fill in with those detailed definitions. And the third challenge is in SQL generation caused by the limitations of large language models, such as large language models are not stable and have some hallucinations, which causes errors in generated SQLs and makes the SQLs inexecutable. For example, if have this input criteria that focus on caregiver or with independent study participation, if we use the generic prompts or prompts from previous work, we can see that the GPT output a table name that do not even exist in the database, and also those concepts that do not exist. Based on the discussion above, we plan to propose a pipeline of to address those challenges. Our pipeline also takes a natural language criteria as input. For the first step, with the complex logical relation, we plan to use GPT to first decompose the criteria into sub-criteria and connect them with AND or OR logic. Here the case, the input is actually combined by 2 parts, and we decompose them into 2 sub-criteria. The first is history of significant liver disease, and the second is 5 years of type 2 diabetes and 5 years of taking metformin, and connect them with OR AND logical relations. And for the second part, if there is complex phenotypes such as history of significant liver disease, we plan to use GPT to further define the phenotype with more detailed and comprehensive definitions. For example, we could use these quantified like lab test results to define the significance of liver disease. And after the definition, same as previous works, NER and I models are needed to like extract the relations in this detailed criteria. The third part is used to generate the SQL. In order to address the issues of large language model-based generation, we propose to fine-tune the large language model to enhance its stability and factuality in generating SQLs. At last, after getting the decomposed SQLs and those relations, we could combine each sub SQLs together for the final SQL. Next, I will introduce the detail of each component. Here is the detail of decomposing the criteria with GPT. At first, we want to use GPT to parse the criteria and reorganize them with a logical relation. Here is an example of a simple prompt. So after the prompt, the GPT actually analyzed the whole input criteria and reorganized it with clear and or relations. So with this clear organized criteria, we further put it to the GPT, and with a generic prompt, it will generate the correct SQL with actually union which stands for or relation between these medications. And for defining complex phenotypes, usually for those complex phenotypes, cooperations are needed in the team members to finally define the exact criteria, which is time consuming and also need much effort to transfer all the defined criteria into SQLs. Now with the help of large language models, it is possible to accelerate the process with the ability of large language models and maybe some guideline resources. Here is an example. We utilize three approaches to define the phenotype and transfer it into SQLs. The first is actually use a scenario prompt, as I showed before. The second approach is that we provide the GPT with an enhanced prompt to let it define the phenotype by itself. In this case, GPT actually add more definitions to the complex phenotype, including some like symptoms and laboratory lab findings and the image and some bio findings. And after the definition, we could provide it to GPT to with like a SQL generation prompt to finally generate the SQL. And the GPT also provided the like those logical relations to combine each detailed criteria. Here we can see that this is actually from the first symptoms, and they use it clearly. They organize it clearly. And the third type is to use additional guidelines for external knowledge sources. Guidelines about all kinds of diseases are used to serve as knowledge, and then we use the complex phenotype as input, and then search in the guideline and return detailed information about this disease and serve as like an external knowledge in the prompt, and then let GPT to generate the more detailed definitions of the phenotype. With the help of guideline, we actually could get like more detailed information, such as the ICD code or the ICD code of all these like conditions or like lab tests. And after that, similar to previous steps, the generated definitions is used to generate the SQLs. So for further like factuality, we could use the like coverage the common parts of the large language model itself, or use all parts from the guideline to like define the phenotype. And further, human is needed to check these definitions of the phenotype and to like select those that he wants and discard those he doesn't want. And after previous steps, we could get more specific and quantified criteria. Some similar semantic parsing methods could be used to further parsing the criteria, such as NER and RE, which is like widely used in previous works. So I am not going to describe them here. So now we could get the half-structured relations between these entities. The third component now is used to enhance large language models in generating SQLs by addressing the instability and hallucinations of the large language models. In this step, we plan to create high-quality parsed entity relation and its corresponding SQL pairs to like enhance the ability of large language model in writing SQLs. At first, we review questions or criteria from three resources. The first is from Query Library, which is run against OMOP CDM and is approved by the community, and it covers a wide range of topics and tables. The second is from the released paper, which contain criteria manually curated by specialists, and the SQL queries that manually generated also by the specialists. The third is the released clinical trial, which is from clinicaltrial.gov. And in our collection step, we mainly focus on the latter two, which is like more closely related to real situations. Here is a simple example of how we extract templates from these criteria. Here, the question is about a diagnosis of this disease, and it includes a constraint about age and the time. So we extract the type of condition and the constraint type as age and the constraint type as time to further generate the templates. So here is the sample of collection of these templates. We collect condition, drug, measurement, procedure, observation, and some of the like device or visit as the main entity type. And we collect more detailed attribute constraint to constrain these main entities, such as age, time, count, duration time, and the visit time. And within each constraint type, there are more like different types to like make the data set more diverse. So next step, after we have those templates, we have to write SQLs for these like templates. And then after we write those SQLs for this main entity type selection and constraint types, we combine the templates and SQLs. Here, this is actually the SQL to select the main entity type for condition. And this one is used to select persons with age constraint. Next step is actually choose a detailed disease and the detailed number for age to fill in these to fill in these SQLs to generate the like the input which is the relation extracting format and maybe the SQL pair. After that, we are going to like fine-tune model, and this is also an ongoing work, and there are more ongoing work to evaluate the whole pipeline, including evaluate the correctness of the generated SQLs, about how it can like pass the criteria into logical relations, and how what is the executability of these generated SQLs. And there are more evaluations of the pipeline components about decomposing the criteria and versus not, which like how many accuracy improved by decomposing the criteria, and like what is the accuracy and coverage of the phenotype definitions, and also the effectiveness of the fine-tuning step. Now we are like annotating more criteria to like finish these evaluation tasks. And there are also further evaluation about the benchmark that we created, including the accuracy of the generated SQL and template pair, about does this generated SQLs could be executed on this real EHR, and how is the logical correctness of these SQLs. And also we need to further check the coverage of the templates, like how does this collected templates coverage those criteria from the real clinical trials. At last, there are some discussion of the pipeline, including the disadvantages of the proposed pipeline. First, it reduces human effort by parsing the logical relations and defining complex phenotypes. Also, it helps people to generate accurate SQLs. And we could also bring more insights into the performance of large language models of generating clinical trial criteria SQLs. And also there are more challenges that we actually haven't addressed, such as the instability of large language models. From the pipeline, we only use GPT to like decompose the criteria and define the phenotype. But as discussed, the large language models are not stable and maybe have some hallucinations. So we need to further address this problem. The second is the issues with concept set generation. In our work, we do not include this concept mapping task. Well, in previous work, this task is usually like finished by using the specific API provided by Odyssey. And now we also want to use this, but for further work, for future work, we could like address this concept task. And for those complex and ambiguous criteria, our pipeline lacks some explanations about how to like pass these criteria into those decomposed parts. And for future work, we could also add more explainability of the pipeline. And that's all for the presentation. Thank you.
Presentation. I think very awesome. And I have a question about your two-step large language model research. And the first, I think the sensitivity of your language model is based on the attention. No, I don't think the attention mechanism of network is important, but I wonder if your model can focus on pay more attention on the marginal but important information, such as we both know the HIV and AIDS. The AIDS can destroy our immune system, but the fever is not hard. But the fever, that word in your database is could be dominant. This information is dominant. So I wonder if your language model can be dominated by that fever or the cough instead of the AIDS or HIV. And I wonder if it is able to discover the intrinsic reasonable the disease, intrinsic disease under the thing. I think that's it.
Okay, yeah, the phenotype is actually a very important and difficult task, like as you say. But for now, we use like large language models to expand the phenotype, and after that, there has to be like human work to review these like generated phenotypes, to review these generated definitions. But for the clinical trial, like for the exercise like a fever or something, there may be like if the criteria focus on specific like disease, it may have some like definitions follow the fever thing. And yeah, but I think
So you said you're gonna have an expert review.
yeah.
phenotype.
That's
That's still some manual work, right?
yeah.
So then
So-
what is the point of,
So my point is that we could generate more definitions of the phenotype, like cover as much as possible. And yeah, human has to just select what he wants. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my question. So did you do any work related to, did you go through all the trials on clinicaltrial.gov and find those, common phenotypes? Have you done any work on that?
Yeah, we are reviewing it, but there's actually a lot of those phenotypes with like vague constraint that is hard to like define.
Yeah, but there's some clear ones, like the age, the
yeah.
demographic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Their diagnosis, those are most
Yeah.
very common, especially in such like specialty areas.
Yeah, for those with the decomposed process, it will be quite clear, and maybe do not need to do like the definition.
Also, it really depends on which disease, on which trial. So some,
Yeah.
it's the criteria is quite simple.
Yeah, just to share a little bit about my background.
Yeah.
So I've done clinical trial patient management work for the past few years. So we developed the clinical trial patient management system, CTPM, within Yale. So it's a Yale technology. And we have covered more than 20 clinical trials. The scope is already one life implemented within Yale. So we use that in oncology and hematology to identify real patients who are eligible for trials. So those kind of like this problem we exactly has experienced. And so one of the I think challenge I want to give it to you is that not every single criteria in those inclusion, exclusion criteria are equally the same importance. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're seeing, you normally will see, oh, this patient should be able to consent. That means nothing. Yeah, if they're older than 18 years old, I mean, some human will check as a last step if this patient can consent or not. So it's not something that you should exclude patients. Also, I'll give you another example. For a patient has been not on certain medication for 6 months. And if you see the chart, you see this patient is currently on the medication. Should we exclude that patient? No. For most of the cases, we can wait. We
Yeah.
can wait till 6 months later, and this patient will become eligible, and they can be enrolled to the study. So I think, yeah, this work is great. I'm not trying to challenge you on doing this. I just want to say that we probably want to step back a little bit, just to rethink about like what is the real purpose of doing this, and how we can implement in the real, in real world, real world environments. Right?
That's actually a very interesting angle. Like,
We can collaborate. Yes.
yeah, thank you. Like for first, like consent, they are actually like predicting whether it is computable for the EHR. And for the consent, it is actually an uncomputable like criteria, which should be discarded at first. Yeah.
Right.
And
We should find the most important common used criteria.
Yeah.
And then around that to find, what is the clear defined phenotypes, what's not clear. So that will be a smaller subset.
Yeah.
And we have experts, we will review those, we store that, so we don't need to query the larger model every time.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I'm on the receiving end of this because I work with patients in clinical trials and, so we're using like my chart notifications, their queries, they're helping us to gain participants, which is great. Kind of piggybacking on that previous question, do you think that the systems in which we are just inputting data into the health records needs to be coded differently, knowing that we want to use language models? Like, isn't there a way that we can make it easier to run the models from kind of the physician standpoint?
So I mean, my chart only filter the the data unstructured data on the EMR. So I think this one a lot of
a lot that we're gonna go in this direction. I think there's.
So I think this is a lot of the criteria are more complicated. Like if you want to check the staging of the patients, the cancer staging. Normally those information is in the pathology report. It's in free text format. So you won't be able to directly query the EMR with that.
That's the question.
Yeah. So
My question is, isn't there a way from that place, the physician with the patient, that we can make it easier for the language models?
yeah, then you need to change the workflow. Yeah.
Right. I think, but I think that if we know that this is eventually where we want to go, so that like just the larger system is working more efficiently, then why are we using so much free text? Like, why can't we just code it better from the get-go?
Because doctor, they don't want to click the buttons, right? They use ambient and also the co-pilot just to dictate, right?
Yeah.
Initially, right now they're just. I think that the end point or the goal is that the doctor will be talking naturally with the patients, and no need to enter anything, and that's the goal, right? And then there's a bot listening and summarize everything, documented, make it clear, structure, compliance for the insurance companies. Everything is there, but still make it structured, able to further analyze.
Yeah.
So that's the goal, but that needs a lot of work. Yeah. But I think so I mean, maybe we can start with like how we design the clinical trials. How do we design the criteria as a starting point, right? Because different people, they use different type of language to describe the same thing.
That's another.
Right. So
For sure.
Yeah, I guess that's something we can do, and also we have some, the original data is from the ethics system, and we have some pipeline to convert those data into the OMAP format. And in the OMAP database, we have like a clinical notes table, it's just a text table. But we have some NLP pipeline to extract entities and some relations into that table. And then we can run the query on that entity table instead of the raw text. So that also some kind of helps to support this process. But still there's a lot of task to do. Okay.
Yeah, another question, why you use ChatGPT? Why don't you just try Llama open source?
Yeah, well, for that,
Hey, this is the pipeline.
yeah, for these previous two steps, now Llama is like not as much as powerful as ChatGPT. So for now, we are just using ChatGPT.
So for the implementation of the engineering process, our software, our pipeline has supported the OpenAI API. So as long as they are compatible with API commits, we can switch to Llama or Gen or other. Yeah, so technically it's the same.
Yeah,
That's the
if-
key effect.
If like Llama fine-tuned on those specific tasks, it can also be used or maybe defeat the GPT.
In fact, those fine-tuned tasks, our model definitely performs better. Yeah, we are still working on the experiment, but I will be better. And also low cost, we can run those models locally. Okay, we can do like 2 minutes or 100 minutes. Yeah, minutes back to everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you.